Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we zero in on a topic just for you, pulling out the really essential stuff, the goal, clarity, maybe a few surprises, but definitely no overwhelm.
Yeah, exactly.
So today we're looking at magnesium, a really vital mineral, and its connection to some major health issues. Think diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and heart disease.
Yeah, big ones. And we've got some good material, a study from Taiwan on older adults, a couple of detailed reviews looking at subclinical deficiency and the situation in the U.S.
Okay, let's get into it. Magnesium. It's often overlooked, isn't it?
It really is, which is kind of wild when you think it's needed for, what, over 300 different enzyme reactions in your body?
300, wow.
Yeah, basic things like how your body makes energy, how it repairs DNA, really fundamental processes.
And yet, we're not getting enough.
Seems like it. The numbers are pretty stark. Nearly half the U.S. population doesn't get the recommended amount from their diet.
Half. That's huge.
It is. After vitamin D, it's the nutrient we're most likely falling short on.
And it's not like it's hard to find, right? Isn't it in leafy greens?
Yep. Its key to chlorophyll gives those dark leafy greens their color. But you know, it often gets called the orphan nutrient.
Orphan nutrient, why is that?
Well, compared to something like calcium, which gets tons of research attention, tons of public health focus, magnesium just hasn't had the same spotlight.
Interesting comparison.
And this lack of attention, it might be, contributing to a lot of health problems. The list of things linked to low magnesium is, well, it's long.
Okay, like what?
Type 2 diabetes, for starters. Metabolic syndrome, which we should definitely unpack. Higher levels of C-reactive protein, that's an inflammation marker.
Right.
Then there's high blood pressure, hardening of the arteries, atherosclerotic vascular disease, sudden cardiac death, osteoporosis, even things like migraines, asthma, colon cancer.
It's quite a list. It really touches on a lot of different systems.
It does. And notice how many involve nerve or muscle function diabetes, hypertension, migraines. Magnesium's role in managing calcium is critical there.
Okay, so let's talk numbers. What does not getting enough actually look like? What did that Taiwan study find?
Right, the Taiwanese elderly study. They found average intakes were around 250 milligrams a day for men, about 216 for women.
And is that enough?
Well, it's only about 68 to 70% of what Taiwan recommends. So no, not quite meeting the mark. And interestingly, the vegans in that older adult group, their intake was significantly lower.
Okay, that makes sense depending on food choices. How about here in the West, like the U.S.?
It's a similar story, really. Even in affluent countries, average intake often falls short. U.S. data from 2005-2006 showed nearly half, 48%, consumed less than they needed just from food.
Still almost half. Has it gotten any better?
Well, that 48% was actually an improvement from 56% a few years earlier, so maybe a slight positive trend. But still, a huge number of people aren't getting enough.
And there's something else going on too, right, with calcium?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Over the last, say, 30 years in the U.S., the balance has shifted. We're generally getting much more calcium relative to magnesium from our food.
So the ratio is off.
Way off, potentially. And this isn't just academic. It reflects changes in our diet, maybe less whole foods, more processed stuff that might be fortified with calcium but lacks magnesium.
Okay, this calcium to magnesium ratio imbalance, how does that connect to things like diabetes?
That's a really key point from the U.S. review. It highlights this, concerning overlap. Between 1994 and 2001, type 2 diabetes diagnoses shot up quite a bit in the U.S.
Right, I remember that period.
And guess what else was happening? That calcium to magnesium ratio in food intake was climbing, specifically going above 3-to-1.
Wow. So, a potential link there.
It certainly raises the question, did this dietary shift play a role? And it makes you wonder, are the official recommendations, the DRIs, even set high enough?
What do you mean?
Well, there's an argument that maybe the healthy people used in the studies to set those recommendations weren't actually optimal in their magnesium status to begin with. They might have had this low-level chronic deficiency.
So our baseline might be flawed. That's unsettling.
It is something to consider, definitely.
Now, you mentioned metabolic syndrome earlier. Can we just clarify what that actually is for everyone listening?
Absolutely. Good point. Metabolic syndrome isn't one single disease. It's more like a cluster of risk factors that often show up together.
Okay, a cluster-like.
Things like high blood pressure, high blood sugar levels, unhealthy cholesterol or triglyceride levels in your blood, and carrying extra fat around your abdomen.
Got it. And having this cluster means?
It significantly bumps up your risk for serious stuff, heart disease, stroke, and especially type 2 diabetes.
And magnesium fits in how?
Well, we already saw low magnesium linked to high blood pressure and diabetes risk. It also plays a role in how our body uses insulin, which affects blood sugar and fats, and even how we store fat. So it's plausible, that being low in magnesium contributes to several pieces of this metabolic syndrome puzzle.
Okay, that connects the dots nicely. So we've got widespread low intake, this concerning calcium imbalance, and metabolic syndrome explained. Let's dig deeper into that direct link. Low magnesium and diabetes. What did the research show?
The Taiwan study had some really striking findings here. First, people with diabetes, both men and women, had significantly higher blood glucose. No huge surprise there.
Right.
But the big one was this. The risk of having diabetes was over 3 times higher, 3.25 times for people with lower magnesium levels in their blood plasma.
3 times higher, that's substantial.
It really is. Specifically, that was for levels below 0.863 millimoles per liter. And they also found, generally, the lower the plasma magnesium, the more common diabetes was in that group, an inverse relationship.
Okay, lower magnesium in the blood, higher diabetes risk. But you said something interesting earlier.
Yes. The puzzle. In that study, they didn't find a direct link between how much magnesium people ate, dietary intake, and their diabetes risk.
So eating less magnesium didn't directly equal higher risk in their findings. How does that work?
It suggests that maybe just counting milligrams consumed doesn't tell the whole story. It could be about absorption, how your body actually uses it, your overall status, which the blood level might reflect better.
So the amount circulating in the body is key.
Seems like it. And get this, that 3.25 times increased risk was seen at levels below 0.863 millimole. But sometimes lab normal ranges go down to 0.75 millimole.
Wait, so you could be technically normal but still have that significantly higher risk.
Exactly. It really challenges what we consider optimal versus just not critically low. The evidence points towards people with diabetes often being deficient, and that deficiency itself probably increases the risk of getting diabetes in the first place.
How does it do that? Like, what's the mechanism with blood sugar?
A key part seems to be how insulin works. Low magnesium can lead to higher calcium levels inside cells, and that excess intracellular calcium can interfere with insulin signaling, making your body less responsive to it. Insulin resistance, essentially.
That's a clear connection. Okay, let's shift gears slightly to the heart. Cardiovascular disease. How does magnesium deficiency play into that?
This is where that review on subclinical deficiency is so important. It argues this hidden deficiency significantly ramps up the risk for a whole host of cardiovascular problems.
Hidden deficiency.
Yeah, the authors actually call it a potential public health crisis because it's often missed, but the downstream effects, healthcare costs, suffering are huge.
Why is it missed so often, if it's that important?
It comes back to the testing. A standard blood test, a serum magnesium test, might not catch it. Why? Because over 99% of your body's magnesium isn't even in your blood.
99%. Where is it then?
Inside your cells, in your bones, your muscles, your organs. Your body works really hard to keep the blood level stable, even if it means pulling magnesium out of those tissues.
So you could have a normal blood test result,
but still be running low where it really counts, inside the cells. And that constant pulling from reserves, like bone, could still contribute to problems like osteoporosis and fractures over time.
That's sneaky.
It is, and think about this. Our Paleolithic ancestors, their diets probably contained way more magnesium, maybe around 600 milligrams a day.
Wow, compared to what we get now.
Right. It suggests our bodies might actually be adapted for or expect much higher levels than many of us consume. Some experts even propose most people might need an extra 300 milligrams a day to really lower chronic disease risk.
An extra 300 milligrams on top of current intake.
That's the argument, yeah. So just because your basic blood test looks okay doesn't mean you're truly sufficient for long-term health.
Okay, so how does this cellular level deficiency hurt the cardiovascular system specifically?
It hits it in several ways. Magnesium is crucial for relaxing the smooth muscle in your blood vessel walls. It also helps manage other minerals vital for blood pressure: sodium, potassium, calcium.
Right.
When magnesium is low, important cellular pumps, the sodium-potassium pump, the calcium pump, don't work as well in heart and blood vessel cells. This can cause sodium and, importantly, calcium to build up inside the cells.
And more calcium inside the cells leads to
vasoconstriction, tightening of the blood vessels, which naturally can lead to higher blood pressure. Low magnesium might also make vessels more sensitive to things that naturally constrict them.
So tighter vessels, higher pressure. Does supplementing help?
Research suggests it can. Studies show giving magnesium supplements can help lower blood pressure, particularly in people already on certain diuretics, like thiazides, which can deplete magnesium.
Interesting.
And remember, we said high intracellular calcium is linked to insulin resistance and hypertension. Low magnesium can contribute to that underlying issue. Big reviews, meta-analyses, they found magnesium supplements can significantly reduce both systolic and diastolic pressure.
And people with high blood pressure and even normal blood pressure.
Yes, in both groups. And the effect might even be stronger at higher doses, maybe over 370 milligrams a day.
Okay, so blood pressure's a big one. What else? Does it affect the blood vessels themselves?
Absolutely. Low magnesium contributes to endothelial dysfunction. The endothelium is that inner lining of your blood vessels.
Right, the lining.
When that lining isn't healthy, your risk of blood clots, thrombosis goes up, and so does the buildup of plaque atherosclerosis. Magnesium deficiency seems to create a pro-atherogenic state, meaning it encourages plaque buildup.
How?
One way is by impairing the release of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is critical for keeping blood vessels dilated and healthy. Low magnesium hampers that. On the flip side, giving magnesium therapy has actually been shown to improve vasodilation in people with coronary artery disease.
So it directly impacts how flexible and open our arteries are.
Seems that way. It's not just pressure, it's the health of the vessel wall itself.
This is all really making sense. Now, just before we go further, if you are finding this deep dive useful, please do help support the channel. Hit subscribe for more content like this, give us a thumbs up if you learned something, and maybe share it with someone who might find it interesting.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
And we've also put some links in the description below if you're interested in looking at high-quality magnesium supplements. Okay, back to the impacts. You mentioned plaque. What about calcium buildup?
Yes, that's another major concern. When magnesium is deficient in soft tissues, it can actually promote calcium depositing where it shouldn't be.
Like where?
In the heart muscle itself, the liver, even skeletal muscles. Some research even points to it being a major factor in kidney disease because of calcium deposits forming in the kidneys.
Wow, calcification of organs.
Animal studies back this up too. Magnesium deficiency in animals can worsen fat deposition in arteries and cause heart muscle damage and calcification. Conversely, higher magnesium intake in humans is linked to a lower risk of significant calcium buildup in the coronary arteries.
So more magnesium might protect against arteries hardening with calcium.
That's the link, yes. And magnesium treatment has even shown promise for improving cholesterol profiles in people with existing heart disease, improving the ratio of good to bad cholesterol carriers.
Okay.
Essentially, the deficiency seems to injure the vessel lining, promoting atherosclerosis. It might even cause body fluids to become supersaturated with calcium, making calcification more likely, and magnesium could help prevent that.
So just to recap the potential heart issues from low magnesium. It's quite a list again.
It really is. We're talking hypertension, arrhythmias, or irregular heartbeats, those dangerous calcifications, atherosclerosis, potentially leading to heart failure, increased blood clotting, heart attacks, stroke, and even sudden cardiac death. It touches almost every aspect of cardiovascular health.
That's incredibly sobering. And it really brings us full circle back to that calcium-magnesium balance we talked about earlier. Can you just remind us how that ratio ties into all this?
Right, the balance is key because higher intakes of calcium and also phosphorus actually increase your body's need for magnesium.
So if you load up on calcium, you need more magnesium to handle it.
Exactly. Some experts think the ideal dietary ratio is probably close to 2 to 1. Calcium to magnesium.
2 parts calcium, 1 part magnesium, but we said the U.S. diet is.
It's shifted dramatically. From around that 2 to 1 historically, it's climbed maybe up to 5 to 1 or even higher in some dietary patterns. Less magnesium coming in, often more calcium and phosphate from dairy, fortified foods, additives, soft drinks.
And that imbalance contributes to the problems.
It seems very likely. Remember that sharp rise in type 2 diabetes in the U.S. between 94 and 2001?
Yeah, when the ratio went above 3 to 1.
Precisely. That correlation is hard to ignore. And think about the mechanisms. If magnesium helps regulate calcium inside cells and relax blood vessels, having way too much calcium relative to magnesium could potentially worsen vasoconstriction, blood pressure, and maybe even that calcification risk. It throws the system off balance.
So it's not just about getting enough magnesium, it's also about not letting the calcium get too far out of whack relative to it.
That appears to be a really crucial part of the picture.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. What's the main takeaway message you think people should get from all this research?
I think the biggest thing is that this subclinical, often hidden magnesium deficiency is probably way more common than we realize. And the evidence is pretty strong that it's a significant driver, maybe even an under-recognized cause of major chronic diseases like diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and all sorts of cardiovascular issues.
And that normal blood test isn't the full story.
Definitely not. A normal level doesn't guarantee sufficiency where it counts inside your cells. So really paying attention to getting enough magnesium through diet, maybe considering supplements if needed after talking with a doctor, and being mindful of that calcium to magnesium balance, it could be incredibly important for long-term health.
It really shifts the perspective on this mineral. So the final thought for you listening, given how widespread this issue seems to be and the huge impact magnesium has from energy to blood sugar to heart health, what simple steps could you think about to make sure your magnesium intake is supporting your overall well-being? Definitely some food for thought there.